This video is an audio segment from the Fantasy for Real podcast, which should be able to be found on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but otherwise can be found in the link in the description. The main focus for this episode is breaking down my rookie rankings one last time before the 2024 NFL Scouting Combine. This video will cover the running back position, and a video tomorrow will cover the wide receiver position, both videos with a focus on my tier gaps and tier differences, and also where my rankings are becoming more clear and where they're becoming more controversial. I do hope to steadily improve the quality of the videos, and one comment last week mentioned using clips, and that's something that I've definitely considered. It's just not something that I'm necessarily capable of, and also have to look into things in terms of YouTube itself. But the point is, no changes have been made this week. I've been focusing on the audio side of things, so this is mostly an audio podcast with just a few breakdown slides in the background. So remember to like the video if you enjoy the content. I've taken enough of your time, and so on with the rankings. Now, for as much as the running back rankings are different on a team-to-team basis, my own running back rankings have stayed fairly stable, especially in my top 10. So Benson and Brooks, Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks have stayed as my top two and mostly have stayed alone in that tier for themselves. Trey Benson has my favorite size adjusted burst, and I think Brooks is my favorite in terms of just a well-rounded running back. I talked about his reception numbers in the last few games before he tore his ACL, but he was really breaking out as a high volume receiving running back, which you don't really see in a cursory view of the numbers because it came on a little late and he did miss the end of the season because of the injury. So Benson and Brooks, my top two guys. If there is a guy hot on the heels, it is my running back 3 as of my ranking show, the fourth show, which did running back and wide receiver rankings in the middle tiers. Jalen Wright is my running back 3, whereas Benson has my favorite size adjusted burst. Jalen Wright has my favorite burst generally in this class, especially, if we're taking any running back that is at least listed over 200 pounds or can play at close to 200 pounds. Just the way he, explodes as a rusher, that 0 to 60 time. I mean, obviously you're not going 60 miles an hour, but whatever. 0 to 60 time on Jalen Wright. That's what I call it. I really love it. Wright's is the best in the class. Benson's is the best when I factor in size. And so that is why those two are 2 of my 3, with Brooks, who is my most well-rounded. What really separates the guys who separate out my top 5 is their pass catching ability. So those 2 guys are Ray Davis and Bucky Irving. Now, Ray Davis is a little bit more my guy than Jalen Wright, even just because some people don't like him as much. And I mean, to be honest, I don't know how I feel about that, because he is going to be 25 years old this year, and that is very scary and definitely a controversy around his value, and something I myself don't like. But age isn't a factor of longevity, it's a factor of progression, and I do believe Ray Davis has the progression excuses in terms of why he was not spotted by the NFL sooner, and his situation the last 2 years as a running back at Vanderbilt and Kentucky is so challenging that it offsets some of the age advantages that I usually worry about. On top of it all, Ray Davis is 5'8.5" as of the Senior Bowl, which is not an ideal height, but he is 220 pounds and had over 60 receptions the last 2 years combined. So those are checking a lot. So that's checking a lot of boxes. That is very intriguing to us. And then Bucky Irving, won't go over the fact that he's small, just because so many other shows, they like Bucky Irving. So you'll hear a lot of people defending why he can work at such a small size. Whereas I don't know if as many people are going to be defending Ray Davis, but Bucky Irving, the big thing is, again, the pass catching. He had over 80 receptions, I believe, the last 2 seasons, with over 50 this year. Those are big pass catching numbers. So while he is a very slight running back, not just in overall weight, I find his stature to be very, diminutive for the NFL game. But Bucky Irving is a guy that does crack my top 5 running backs at this point, because pass catching is so important for these fantasy running backs. So speaking of fantasy running backs needing pass catching, my next 3 running backs are listed where they are, because I think they're a little bit more 2-down guys to me, and that's Audric Estime of Notre Dame, Blake Corum of Michigan, and Braylon Allen of Wisconsin. Braylon Allen of Wisconsin, whereas Ray Davis being at 4 is probably my highest controversial ranking. Braylon Allen at 8 is definitely the negative one. That seems to get me the most, talk back on social media platforms or whatnot. I thought Blake Corum at 7 would be kind of similar, but it seems like as much as he gets ranked highly in aggregates, people don't come out to defend Blake Corum, at least at this stage, as much as they were even doing last year, it felt like, after his very, very good 2022 season. But, when comparing Audric Estime to Braylon Allen, people talk all the time about Braylon Allen being this exceptionally young player, and he is. There's no denying that. But Audric Estime is one of the youngest running backs I've ever evaluated too. Now he is like 4 or 5 months older than Braylon Allen, because that's the whole thing with Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen is significantly younger than my second youngest running back I've ever evaluated. But at the same time, he just never had the peak season that I look for in the running back. And it's not just a statistical thing. There are issues I have with his burst and balance compared to, I think, the market. I don't think he generates as much power as people give him credit for, especially as quickly. I think he has very good downfield power, but I'm not sure he has first step power the same way that Derrick Henry needs to have first step power to be the running back he is, right? So that's why I have Braylon Allen a little bit lower. I fully acknowledge with his age, this is a ranking that I could live to regret. Okay, you're just going to make those sometimes when you rank. That's just the reality. But what I'll also say is, people tell me all the time that the NFL is going to draft this guy earlier because he's projectable, and I just don't see evidence that the NFL drafts running backs early because they're projectable and young. I do see evidence that the NFL, like early declares compared to non-early declares or seniors. I see that. But in terms of early declares being particularly young, I don't see that. And just last year, we had a guy in Israel Abanikanda who was the second youngest running back I've ever evaluated, 3 or 4 months older than Braylon Allen, but still had a much better peak season and most likely tested far better than Braylon Allen will. Now, Izzy did do it at a pro day, and so that is a little bit different, but his numbers were so insane. I really don't think that was just a pro day. I think he really is a very good athlete. And Israel Abanikanda went in the 5th round. No one was taking him 3 rounds higher, or even at the end of day 2, because he was young and projectable. He fell to the 5th round. Now, maybe there's something we don't know about. I don't know. The point is, I don't see any evidence that the NFL is going to draft a player higher because they're exceptionally young at running back. They do draft early declares higher, and I do believe that Ray Davis could fall below where I have him because he's older and exceptionally older. But I don't see any evidence that because someone's under 21 as opposed to 21 and a half, the NFL is going to rush out and grab them at the running back position where it peaks so young. And so to round out my top 10, I had Marshawn Lloyd, Dylan Laube also staying the same. I have heard significantly more heat than I was expecting to hear on Marshawn Lloyd. It seemed like he impressed a lot of people at the Senior Bowl, so that might be one I revisit. Laube is a significantly older prospect coming from the FCS. There's a lot of flags there, but he has first step quickness, size, and pass catching once again, which really sells him as the player that I am ranking as my running back 10. I also have Jaden Sheridan, who is up to my honorable mention 1 at this point, just on speculation, because he's just kind of this interesting mystery box. He's undersized. He went to the FCS level, but unlike Laube, he is an early declare. He only spent 3 years at the collegiate level. It is strange that he's skipping the FBS altogether because of that. Maybe that means the NFL is high on him, rather. But, he's this interesting mystery box profile. The reason he is not higher is that his weigh-in at the Shrine Bowl was right around 180 pounds. And so it's just really hard to, the floor of a guy who's 180 pounds, who's never played above the FCS level, which, if you're not clear on these distinctions, is the level outside the top 130 plus college football teams. That's obviously quite a projection to make on someone who doesn't have the size of Laube, who, it makes it easier to see it translate. So just to recap these running backs really quick before I go on to the wide receivers, I have Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks in the first tier with a minor gap above Jalen Wright, who is quickly catching up to them. I then have a small gap behind them before Ray Davis of Kentucky and Bucky Irving of Oregon, and then another gap really defined by that pass catching before Audric Estime, Blake Corum, and Braylon Allen, who I like better than Marshawn Lloyd and Dylan Laube, who round out my top 10 before my number 1 honorable mention in Jaden Sheridan. And that's it for this clip of the Fantasy for Real podcast. If you're looking for more on the podcast, I also discuss some value points for NFL players like Jordan Love and Tyjae Spears, and briefly discuss the NFL Scouting Combine and its importance, or at times lack thereof. So if you like the video, make sure to hit the like button and consider listening to the show if you're someone who listens to podcasts. That would mean a lot to me. Most weeks I have an episode out every Monday and Thursday, though the schedule is subject to change, and I hope to see you next time.